Have you ever heard that 30,000 goats almost destroyed an entire United States military base? Not saboteurs, not bombs, not enemy agents, but ordinary domestic goats. This is not an anecdote or a screenwriter's invention. This is a true story of how one small decision turned into a colossal catastrophe. Subscribe to the channel. There is much interesting ahead. The story began in the 1870s. American naval sailors were looking for a reliable way to provide themselves with food during long voyages and stays in the waters of the Pacific Ocean. The solution looked simple and obvious. Bring live livestock to a small uninhabited island so that fresh meat is always at hand. San Clemente Island is located about 80 kilometers southwest of Los Angeles. It is narrow, rocky, and constantly swept by sea winds. The United States Navy turned it into a training range. There was practically no civilian population there, but the nature of the island was completely unique. Rare creatures lived on the island. A special variety of jay, a tiny lizard not found anywhere else on the planet, and turtles that had adapted to local conditions over millennia. The vegetation was also unusual. Drought-tolerant shrubs, low trees, and grasses that knew how to survive on rocky slopes under the merciless sun. And so, into this fragile natural system, the military released goats. At first, there were very few of them, literally units. It did not even occur to anyone that anything bad could come of it. The goats grazed on the slopes, provided milk and meat, and did not particularly annoy anyone. Everything went exactly as intended. However, goats have one remarkable feature. They multiply with amazing speed. With a sufficient amount of food and a complete absence of predators, their numbers increase exponentially. On San Clemente, there were no wolves, no bears, no other animals capable of restraining the growth of the herd. The goats found themselves completely left to their own devices. 10 years passed and the goats increased noticeably. 20 years passed and there were very many of them. By the middle of the 20th century, the herd already numbered thousands of heads. And by the 1980s, about 30,000 wild goats were in charge on the island. 30,000 animals on an island with an area of only about 145 square kilometers. What do 30,000 goats do when they have nothing else to do? They eat. They eat continuously. They eat everything in sight. They eat from dawn to dusk. Shrubs, grass, young shoots, tree bark and roots. They eat plants down to the very base and do not give them any opportunity to recover. Over 100 years, the goats destroyed about 80% of all the island vegetation cover. 8 out of every 10 bushes, trees and grasses simply disappeared. The island began to change right before our eyes. Where green thickets used to be, bare cracked earth now stuck out. Where streams used to flow, deep washouts and ravines appeared. Soil without roots holds poorly. In rains, it washes away and slides down the slopes. In the dry season, it is lifted into the air by gusty winds. This is exactly what began to happen on San Clemente. The island was literally collapsing and melting year after year. The military base came under threat. Landslides created a danger for roads and infrastructure objects. Dust storms interfered with flights and normal equipment operation. The shoreline was eroding, exposing the rocky foundation of the island. What started as a cheap and convenient source of food grew into a serious military problem. But it was not just about the military infrastructure. Scientists and conservationists raised the alarm for a completely different reason. That same unique jay, lizard and turtles that had lived on the island for thousands of years were on the brink of total extinction. Their home was practically destroyed. They had nowhere to live, and nothing to eat. The San Clemente Island jay became a symbol of this catastrophe. Its numbers decreased so much that ornithologists openly spoke of a real threat of total extinction. A bird that had survived for millennia could not stand up against the conditions that goats created in just 100 years. The Navy faced a difficult choice. On the one hand, the island was necessary as a range. Firing took place here, landings were practiced, and equipment was tested. On the other hand, United States environmental laws required the protection of rare species. The military was caught between two equally mandatory requirements. For 20 years, from the beginning of the 1960s to the early 80s, negotiations, meetings, and sessions were held. The military dragged their feet. Scientists demanded immediate action. Officials produced papers. And the goats, meanwhile, continued to eat. Every day, every hour, every minute. Finally, in 1980, a decision was made. The goats must leave the island. Every single one. All 30,000. This was a colossal task that no one had faced before on such a scale. The operation began, and it turned out much more difficult than expected. The first stage was relatively easy. Where the goats stayed in large herds, they could be trapped or shot in groups. Special teams combed the island, destroyed the animals, and took out the carcasses. The count went into the hundreds, then exceeded thousands. In parallel, they tried to catch some of the goats alive and remove them from the island. Some were transferred to farms, others were sent to zoos. This was more humane, but incomparably more difficult and expensive. A live goat had to be caught, held, loaded, and transported. All this required a great expenditure of time and money. Helicopters became an indispensable tool for the operation. From the air, it was possible to detect animals over large areas, monitor their movements, and guide ground groups. Pilots circled over the island for hours, searching for goats in the folds of the terrain and thick thickets. Everyone was involved in the operation, from private infantrymen to experienced snipers. The work went on around the clock, 7 days a week, in any weather. But the further the operation progressed, the more difficult it became. After the large herds were destroyed, the surviving goats scattered across the entire island. They went into the most inaccessible canyons, hid in the rocks, and squeezed into impenetrable thickets. A single goat in the mountains is not at all the same as a herd on an open plain. It had to be found, tracked, and reached. San Clemente Island is all cut by ravines and covered with rocky ledges. People moved across this terrain with difficulty, whereas the goats felt right at home there. Years passed. Hunting teams replaced each other. The counters recorded ever larger numbers, but there was still no complete victory. There were still goats on the island. Exactly how many, no one knew. They hid so skillfully that a precise count was simply impossible. By the end of the 90s, it seemed that the main work was already performed. Most of the goats had been exterminated, but the last few hundred turned out to be truly coming. They seemed to consciously learn to avoid people, changed routes, and bypassed the places where they had previously seen hunters. It was then that the military took an unconventional step. They hired a professional hunter from Africa, a man who had spent his whole life in the bush, tracking animals in the harshest conditions. He knew how to think like prey. He understood the logic of animals, their habits, and their reaction to danger. This hunter took on a task from which others had already backed down. The last 500 goats, the most cautious, the most resilient, and the most unpredictable. Those who survived 20 years of pursuit and learned to be invisible. The hunter approached the matter methodically and professionally. In 4 months, he got them all. All 500, one after another, sometimes a few a day, sometimes one. He studied tracks, analysed paths, and calculated routes in advance. He worked alone, without helicopters and thermal imagers, relying exclusively on his own experience. In the year 2009, the last goat was taken on San Clemente Island. Almost 140 years after the first animals were brought to the island, the operation concluded. The island was completely cleared. This took almost 30 years of active work and cost many millions of dollars. But what became of the island then? As it turned out, nature knows how to recover. Already a few years after the start of the island clearing operation, scientists recorded the first signs of life. Where bare earth had previously lay, young green shoots appeared. Plant seeds that had been dormant in the soil for decades waiting for their hour began to germinate. Grass returned first. After it followed shrubs. Then young trees began to rise. The process was slow but steady. The island was starting to turn green again. The San Clemente Island jay gradually restored its numbers. Birds returned to places where they had not been seen for decades. Nests appeared where the very concept of bird grounds had long become only a memory. Ornithologists watched this with undisguised joy and relief. Lizards, which were threatened with total extinction, also began to recover. Their habitat was returned to them. Bushes, grass, shelters, and hunting grounds among the stones. The population slowly but surely went up. And then scientists decided to go even further. They asked the question, what could speed up and strengthen the island recovery? The answer turned out to be unexpected. Turtles are needed. Large turtles that know how to eat vegetation moderately without uprooting it by the roots as the goats did. Giant turtles were brought to the island intentionally. They took over a role that scientists called the work of living lawnmowers. The turtles eat grass and shrubs, but they do it in a completely different way than goats. They do not tear out the roots and do not destroy the entire plant. Turtles move unhurriedly and eat a little at a time. They help maintain the balance of the vegetation cover, not allowing one species to displace all the others. This is called ecosystem management using large animals. A smart and elegant way to restore what was destroyed. Today, San Clemente Island looks completely different than it did in the 80s. The vegetation has been restored by about half, and this process continues. The military range still operates, but now, next to military exercises, turtles wander slowly along the slopes. The story of San Clemente Island has become a textbook example for ecologists and military specialists around the world. It is studied as a clear lesson of what happens when a person does not think about the consequences of their intervention in nature, and as an example that even a serious catastrophe can be corrected if you set to work for real. How much did the entire operation cost? The exact numbers are classified, as is much that is related to military facilities. But according to various estimates, only direct costs for the shooting and removal of goats amounted to tens of millions of dollars. To this are added years of work by scientists, hunters, and helicopter pilots. For comparison, the first goats cost the military, most likely, a few coins or were entirely free. A tiny, cheap, and seemingly quite reasonable decision turned into one of the most expensive conservation operations in the history of the American military department. Another amazing animal lived on the island that few people have heard of. This is the island fox, a small animal found exclusively on the Channel Islands. It is smaller than an ordinary house cat and weighs from 1 to 2.5 kilograms. This is the smallest fox on the entire continent of North America. The island fox appeared on San Clemente thousands of years ago, presumably getting there from the mainland with the help of humans. Over long centuries of isolation, it turned into a separate subspecies. Slightly smaller, with a different colouring, and with fewer vertebrae in the tail. This fox is not at all afraid of people and lets them get close. It would seem that after the departure of the goats, the fox should have fared better. The vegetation is being restored and the food base is expanding. But history turned differently. The military themselves began to trap and destroy the foxes. And here is for what reason. A rare subspecies of bird, the loggerhead shrike, lived on the same island, which is found nowhere else on Earth. Only on San Clemente. By the year 1998, only 14 individuals remained in the wild. 14 birds. The species stood at the very edge of the abyss. Foxes raided the nests of the shrike and ate the chicks. The military decided the bird must be saved at any cost and proceeded to trap the foxes. Some of the animals died. The fox population on the island decreased sharply. People once again saved some by causing damage to others. The situation reached a dead end. Destroying the fox was impossible, as it was also a rare protected species. But leaving the shrike without protection was also not possible. Then, the military found an unexpected way out. Electric fences were installed around the bird nesting sites. They scared away the foxes that came too close, and gave the birds the opportunity to reproduce peacefully. Simultaneously, the San Diego Zoo began to breed shrikes in captivity and release young birds on the island. The program brought fruit. By the year 2023, the shrike population grew to several thousand individuals. The species was officially removed from the list of endangered ones. The fox also survived and restored its numbers. Today, about 1,200 island foxes live on San Clemente. Scientists monitor them with GPS, tracking their movements and the state of the population over the course of the whole year. The animals feel confident. The night lizard from San Clemente Island also went through hard times. Goats destroyed the stones and shrubs under which it hides and lays eggs. When the vegetation began to recover, the lizard returned to places where it had not been seen for decades. In the year 2023, it was excluded from the list of protected species. Military artillery fire from ships at the southern part of the island also caused serious damage to nature. The shells set the shrubs on fire. Fires destroyed the very thickets that had recovered with such difficulty after the goats. The military had to adjust the exercise schedule to prevent fires during the bird nesting period. The professional hunter from Africa, who completed the operation to destroy the last goats, became a kind of legend of this story. His name, in open sources, almost does not figure. The military are not inclined to excessive publicity, but exactly his work turned out to be key. In the year 2023, the American government held a solemn ceremony on San Clemente Island. The Navy and the Nature Conservation Service jointly celebrated the restoration of 5 animal and plant species officially excluded from the list of endangered ones. 40 years of work, and the result speaks for itself. Today, San Clemente Island is closed to ordinary tourists. It still remains a military range where exercises of the fleet, marines, and special units go on around the clock. But in the same canyons where shells burst, rare birds nest. Next to military roads, foxes wander. Life and war coexist on one small island. Subscribe to the channel and be sure to write your thoughts in the comments. Your opinion is very important to us.